Brock Lesnar, the WWE, mixed martial arts, UFC, there's been a major crossover. Now, this has been going on for a little bit of time because if you remember what The Rock and Ronda Rousey cooked up during WrestleMania, it brought in ratings that made Vince McMahon drool. And of course, when it comes to ratings, it means more money, it means more sponsorships, more advertising. We understand that. But now Brock Lesnar is jumping back to the UFC, his first fight in years. He's gotten added to an already stellar card of UFC 200 to take on Mark Hunt. And now the WWE is thinking, well, maybe you can leverage Brock Lesnar's position to grab the likes of Paige Van Zandt or Ronda Rousey again, or potentially other UFC fighters to come and be a part of WrestleMania 33.
Yeah.
Now, there's a couple different sides to this. Some people think that these are backdoor deals. Mm-hmm. Some outlets are running that they're a partnership between the UFC and WWE, like or a handshake deal, as you'd call it. I'm going to try to see this for what it is. And from what I take out of this situation, it's not a backdoor deal. It's pretty obvious. Both these organizations could use each other to promote their products even more.
That is the point, and I'm going to elaborate on what I think the main reason is, right? So what is the main constraint that Dana White may see in some of his fighters who are very talented? Is that they don't market themselves as well, right? Mm-hmm. And one thing you're taught as a WWE fighter is you're basically an actor. You have to market yourself. You have to be charismatic, right? So then flip it. What's the one thing that WWE wrestlers and the sport itself faces is the fact that they're not considered to be a sport, and these athletes are actually actors more than they are athletes. They don't have the skill, the technique that some of the fighters do. So what happens when you drag a fighter across? You're winning both sides of it. Mm-hmm. When you put someone like Ronda Rousey into the ring for the WWE, we know how badass she is. We know the fact that whether or not it's an illusion that's in front of our eyes, whether some believes that wrestling's real or not, I'm not going to hold it against you, to each their own, but for those that come up against that obstacle to think that WWE is not as authentic as many people think, it will seem more authentic when you have a badass fighter like Ronda Rousey in there who knows what it takes to win. The same way that you may break those stereotypes related to the WWE when you bring Brock Lesnar across, when you see him actually going in full force and fighting those athletes in the MMA or in UFC or whatever you want to say. So I think that, again, I wouldn't be surprised if there's backdoor dealings. The drool that's coming down from Vince McMahon's mouth for Ronda Rousey being in WrestleMania is being caught by Dana White, and then he's recycling it, and then he's spitting it back up.
I think it's called snowballing. Just to be
a little bit more graphic than some would have thought for the description, but it is what it is. They're going to both make money.
Here's even what's more interesting is the USADA rulebook, which we've had to open up a few times over the past couple of weeks in terms of drug testing and drug exemptions. UFC very quick to give the exemption to Brock Lesnar. UFC statement here. While conversations with the heavyweight, and they're referring to Brock Lesnar, have been ongoing for some time, Lesnar required permission from WWE to compete in UFC 200. Still considered and only agreed to terms and signed a bout agreement last Friday. He was therefore unable to officially start the anti-doping policy process any earlier. UFC, however, did notify Lesnar in the early stages of discussions that if he were to sign with the UFC, he would be subject to all of the anti-doping rules. Lesnar and his management have now been formally educated by USADA on the policy, procedures, and expectations. Good move by the UFC. Actually shows that they're learning some of their lessons. For example, BJ Penn, who was not informed of the new USADA drug testing and all of what goes on with the UFC drug testing program. So it shows that the UFC is learning from their kind of mistakes. It wasn't the UFC's fault that BJ Penn was not informed on USADA's drug testing, IVs, everything that goes along with that. It was more like the fact that ignorance is not an excuse. In this case, BJ Penn just was from such a different time in the UFC that the rules changed and he was just unaware. And there was just an honest mistake. When you read all the reports on it, you're like, BJ Penn was so quick to just be like, yeah, I IV'd last week.
Yeah,
I smoked a joint last week. I had a drink last week. Like he said it so casually.
Yeah.
So it shows that at least that they're going out of their way to inform it, and maybe they're going even more out of their way to inform Brock Lesnar so nothing shows up potentially just because another hit to their UFC 200 card and Dana White's drooling amount of money will start overflowing. And he might drown on it.
Yeah. And I think the other point I wanted to make is that, again, right, so we call it as it is, and this is just from my perspective on the sport, is that MMA fans are very protective. And that means protective of their athletes because a lot of the time, MMA, right, was never as popular as it is now. That's just a claim fact. To the hardcores, it's always been popular, but I'm talking about just in terms of mainstream
of course.
Coverage of it. So they're protective, and by the means, I mean they don't think they need added promotion. So like Frankie Edgar doesn't need to change. He's going to be just as I would say marketable to anyone. That's not true. Frankie Edgar, again, has always been shouting from the rooftops that he wanted McGregor and he wanted those fights. And it's because he wasn't that marketable character, no one would listen as much.
No one could hear him from the rooftop.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I do think that out of both of these groups, which organization wouldn't be happier with the crossover? I would allude to the MMA audience, not being as happy with seeing their fighters going and performing in the WWE. They think that might take away from the badassness that attaches himself to these fighters. Like Nate Diaz, I don't see stepping into WrestleMania anytime soon or being a consistent figure. I think a one-off appearance, it'd be great to see him. I'd great to see him use the Stockton slap.
Nate, Nick, Snoop, Bongs in the ring. That's what we're looking for.
I mean, like, I couldn't imagine that, like, he doesn't fit, I think, to the WWE persona as a character himself. Whereas, like, Conor McGregor, at the end of his career, could probably easily become a fighter on the
there's
WWE.
There's a lot of headlines, and this is headline chasing, so I actually don't believe this. I don't firmly believe the WWE is going out of their way to try to steal Ronda Rousey. It's a wording thing. Are they potentially making her an offer for a career choice to come to the WWE? Wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be surprised if that's been going on since they had the original conversation before she stepped into the ring with The Rock.
Yeah.
And then ratings skyrocketed even more for them. So it's just a matter of how you're reading into it. I think it was just a brash headline. The two that I read this morning were, is the WWE stealing Ronda Rousey? When you look at it that way, no. Is the WWE offering Ronda Rousey potentially a lot of money?
Yeah.
Yes.
And do you know the one person that doesn't care about who approves of these fighters going either way, I don't think, is Dana White, because his card for UFC 200 is going to take a major boost because Brock Lesnar's coming by. And you know who he's dragging in to watch that fight, if they're not already there? The WWE fans, who are big fans of Brock Lesnar, who, no matter whether they see him fake punches in the WrestleMania ring or he's battling someone's head against a cage, they're going to go crazy either way. And they're going to see him and they're going to turn up in their numbers to watch him. So whether or not we agree or disagree with it, Dana White, Vince McMahon, as long as they get those numbers in with the push that they're going to put behind it, then it's still going to happen.